Welcome to Compression, the quest to $100 million in just 1 year. Join me, your host, Logan Freeman, in this one-of-a-kind interactive podcast experience where I am on a quest to compress 3 years of achievement and production into 12 months. And no, the answer is not to just work harder. I'm bringing you not only ideas and concepts that are complete at the theoretical level, but they're also effective at the applied level. Look, guys, knowledge is not power. It is potential power. Knowledge plus massive strategic action equals power. We're talking about strategy, systems, accountability, all in real time. This is Compression. Welcome back, guys, to a special edition of the Compression podcast. I'm always throwing the curveballs. I guess you would throw a curveball like that, maybe. Always throwing the curveball at Jerome, and today is no different. We're gonna dive into a concept that we could have called compression leverage. We could have called compression a lot of different things. It could be compound. It could be, all of these different ideas that are kind of working towards the same mentality of doing more in less time and how to actually systemize that. Well, I found a guy who wrote an incredible book. And this guy, the book that he wrote, the gentleman he wrote the book about, Naval Ravikant, is just a really interesting human being. And he was introduced to me by a few folks. And so what we're going to do today is whenever I hear about somebody, I want to go see if they've written a book. And Naval had not written a book. He writes most of his content on Twitter, and he does tweet storms. And I'm not on Twitter, but I did find a book called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And on the back, you see this picture of this gentleman, Eric Jorgensen. Well, through my research, I found that Eric Jorgensen lives in Kansas City. So who did I sit down with earlier this week? Eric Jorgensen. And he's my age. He's 31 years old. Sorry, Eric, for telling everybody how old you are. But I'm very impressed with his approach to reading. And he got Tim Ferriss to write the foreword, the only foreword, I believe, that Tim Ferriss has ever written. And this guy is in Kansas City. He's my age, and he's got an incredible book. Now, and this is an interesting book because it's an aggregation. And I always told you guys, I love assimilators and aggregators. And I kept trying to figure out what all of these words meant at the beginning of compression. And other people are calling it different things. Well, Naval Ravikant has coined the term leverage. And so Eric Jorgensen and I spoke about leverage for quite some time in our meeting. But what I'm finding is that you can write a book about somebody, get access to Naval Ravikant and Tim Ferriss if you're willing to go through the work of aggregating and putting it all into one clear and concise and compelling way. But I was just blown away with Eric's, I think, mentality. He was a Detroit, Michigan guy, went out to Silicon Valley, and they've scaled their company called Zarly, based out of Kansas City now. But as I'm reading this book, man, some things have really started to strike me as extremely interesting. And Naval has done an incredible job, I think, verbalizing what I am trying to verbalize in my own words. And when I started reading this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just gold, man. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off with, and this is going to take a little bit of time, but I'm going to read the tweet storm from Naval Ravikant that he's famous for. There's a lot of podcast episodes that people brought him on to talk about this tweet storm, and there's tons of people who have broken this down. And Jerome and I are going to do that today. And the heavy focus is actually going to be on leverage. And leverage is broken down into 3 parts. And we're going to talk about those today because I am in this space now of using leverage via hiring, more people. And so that's why it's extremely interesting to me. So we're going to start. Jerome, you got any first thoughts before we jump into this tweet storm that Naval wrote?
What is a tweet storm?
I had to learn. And a tweet storm is when somebody, because Twitter is only a certain amount of characters, they just continually tweet on the same thread. They build upon their previous thoughts. And so all of these are just building upon the previous one, but there's some incredible insights into this. So this might take a few minutes, and we might pause and talk a little bit about some of them, but I kind of want to get through this. It'd probably take me, 3 or 4 minutes to read this to you guys. So this is the tweet storm by Naval Ravikant called How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky. So the first one starts, seek wealth, not money or status. Wealth is having assets that earn while you sleep. Money is how we transfer time and wealth. Status is your place in the social hierarchy. Understand ethical wealth creation is possible. If you secretly despise wealth, it will elude you. Ignore people playing the status games. They gain status by attacking people playing wealth creation games. You're not going to get rich renting out your time. You must own equity, a piece of a business, to gain your financial freedom. You will get rich by giving society what it wants, but does not yet know how to get it at scale. Pick an industry where you can play long-term games with long-term people. The internet has massively broadened this possible space of careers. Most people haven't figured this out yet. Play iterated games. All the returns in life, whether in wealth, relationships, or knowledge, come from compound interest. Pick business partners with high intelligence, energy, and above all, integrity. Don't partner with cynics and pessimists. Their beliefs are self-fulfilling. Learn to sell, learn to build. If you can do both, you will be unstoppable. Arm yourself with specific knowledge, accountability, and leverage. Specific knowledge is knowledge you cannot be trained for. If society can train you, it can train someone else and replace you. Specific knowledge is found by pursuing your genuine curiosity and passion rather than whatever is hot right now. Building specific knowledge will feel like play to you, but will look like work to others. When specific knowledge is taught, it's through apprenticeships, not school. Specific knowledge is often highly technical or creative. It cannot be outsourced or automated. Embrace accountability and take business risks under your own name. Society will reward you with responsibility, equity, and leverage. And this is from Archimedes. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Okay, so we're about halfway through the tweet storm. I'm going to continue, but one of the big points that Jerome and I are going to spend time talking about today is this concept of leverage. Fortunes require leverage. Business leverage comes from capital, people, and products with no marginal cost of replication. Capital means money. To raise money, apply your specific knowledge and accountability and show resulting good judgment. Labor means people working for you. It's the oldest and most fought over form of leverage. Labor leverage will impress your parents, but don't waste your life chasing it. Capital and labor are permissioned leverage. Everyone is chasing capital, but someone has to give it to you. Everyone is trying to lead, but someone has to follow you. Code and media are permissionless leverage. They're the leverage behind the newly rich. You can create software and media that works for you while you sleep. An army of robots is freely available. It's just packed into data centers for heat and space efficiency. Use it. If you can't code, write books and blogs, record videos and podcasts. Leverage is a force multiplier for your judgment. Judgment requires experience, but can be built faster by learning foundational skills. There's no skill called business. Avoid business magazines and business classes. Study microeconomics, game theory, psychology, persuasion, ethics, mathematics, and computers. Reading is faster than listening. Doing is faster than watching. You should be too busy to do coffee while still keeping an uncluttered calendar. Set and enforce an aspirational personal hourly rate. If fixing a problem will save you less than your hourly rate, ignore it. If outsourcing a task will cost you less than your hourly rate, outsource it. Work as hard as you can, even though who you work with and what you work on are more important than how hard you work. Become the best in the world at what you do. Keep redefining what you do until this is true. There are no get rich quick schemes. Those are just someone else getting rich off of you. Apply specific knowledge with leverage, and eventually you will get what you deserve. When you're finally wealthy, you'll realize it wasn't what you were seeking for in the first place. But that is for another day. Summary. Productize yourself. That is the tweet storm, my man. And there is so many nuggets in that, 30, I guess, character tweet storm that he strung along. And I don't know how long it was, how many days that he went over through that tweet storm. But man, I want to dive into that, but I want to get your, initial thoughts and feedback on the tweet storm. I mean, holy cow. It summarizes kind of compression to a T, but man, I want to hear your initial thoughts on it.
Man, so I sent this to you. They did a breakdown, right? They did like a 3-hour podcast on this thing. This is phenomenal. Where he ended it, right? Read that line again where he talked about wealth, seeking wealth.
Okay, so let's see here. Oh, when you're finally wealthy, you'll realize it wasn't what you were seeking for in the first place.
Whew.
We've talked a lot about that, haven't we, recently?
Whew. So, a lot of people, and I think this is the point, right? So we build all the things, right? He told you how to build the things. And then he tells you that's not what you're chasing.
Mm-hmm.
And being clear on the why is super important. Super, super important. The thing that I thought was really cool, though, is early on, he said, seek wealth, not money or status.
Yep.
All of those things are just tools. Money and status are just tools to have influence to affect the outcome. But if you're just seeking a state of wealth, I think you're going to be sorely disappointed. So I've been enamored with Naval. Shout out to Brian Adams for connecting me with the thought, because he is a thought leader, and I had no idea who the guy was or what he'd done before that showed up in my text messages. But yeah, man, compressing, the only way you can compress is if you have leverage.
Yeah.
Right? The replication of self, the ability to duplicate, the harnessing of other energy outside of your own.
That's right, man. So a couple things I want to kind of pull out of this that really stood out to me were obviously the leverage piece, which we'll get to, but there's a few other ones. Specific knowledge. This is very interesting to me. And specific knowledge being, like he mentioned, something that you cannot find or be trained for. If society can train you, it can train someone else and then replace you. And so, for example, they go on to iterate on a lot of these thoughts. But this is interesting. So he said, I have some sales skills, which is a form of specific knowledge. I have some analytical skills on how to make money. And I have this ability to absorb data, obsess about it, and break it down. That is a specific skill that I have. I also love tinkering with technology. All of this stuff feels like play to me, but it looks like work to others. Okay. I just took a picture, and I'll post this on LinkedIn pretty soon. So very similar to him, I have a very unique skill set of breaking concepts down and getting obsessed with them, right? And actually doing the work and figuring it out. And so recently it's been macroeconomics. He talks about microeconomics, which I'm reading Freakonomics, which is all about micro, but understanding the macroeconomics of this country, of our financial system, the difference between the financial system and the economy. and understanding the different levers that make that up, the short-term debt cycle, the long-term debt cycle, all of these different things that are making me able to break this down for investors is leading me into kind of this new, I think, realm of understanding macroeconomics, breaking it down into a very simple way that my investors can understand, and then taking those two things, applying it to their portfolio and helping them make informed decisions. And so I think I share that with Naval. Now I don't love tinkering with technology. That's not what I'm doing. So he's over there coding, which is fine, or he's having people code for him. But if you caught one of these in here, it was, if you can't code, write books and blogs, record videos and podcasts. What are we doing? What are we doing right now? And so our coding is doing exactly what we're doing. So understanding your specific knowledge and finding that, and then honing that in on how you can utilize it in your business is crucial. And I'm not going to continue to read out of the book that much because I want to have a conversation around this, but I can't say this enough. You have to be self-aware to understand what your specific knowledge is and where it is best used. And for me, understanding the commercial real estate investing space, but then also understanding all the macroeconomic and then microeconomic kind of levers that are going on, help to have much more, what I'll say, productive conversations. And instead of saying to somebody, hey, I'm going to get back to you on this, whenever I start rattling off all of the different lattice works that we're utilizing in our own business to talk through why we're doing what we're doing from a macroeconomic approach, investors are like, what are these guys talking about? Like, and I'm not, they don't even understand because they didn't study economics, and that's fine. I was telling Taylor last night on date night, because it was our date night last night. I told her, I said, I've almost got to the point where I would like to go get an economics degree. Now I'm going to do what Tim Ferriss talks about and getting the real world MBA in economics by reading and subscribing to guys like Richard Duncan and things like that, because I don't need to necessarily go sit in a classroom, but I'm aggregating all of these different resources, creating a document, and then creating videos and content based off of these resources that I'm doing. And so that is my specific knowledge in this space. So you use all of the macroeconomic levers, you tie it back to commercial real estate, and now you're having a different conversation with somebody than, why we're talking about, fees, or why we're talking about, the specific asset class. You don't even get to that point. And so the one thing I just want to make sure people understand here is, in your space, especially if you're some sort of entrepreneur, you have to understand what your specific knowledge is, and then, just use it to your advantage. And I've always thought that, this reading and doing all of this stuff was like, man, what am I doing this for? Well, it's because it was my innate specific knowledge. And now I've got it focused, and I've got it directed, and I've got it dialed in and rifled in to something that's also impacting our business. And holy cow, just like Naval says in the tweet storm, you figure that out, you apply leverage to it, and you will be unstoppable. So I think that some folks have been reaching out to me recently saying, yeah, I'm watching your videos and following your content, but I don't know where to start. And I said, well, look, you don't start where I started. Everybody wants to know what I did, how I got to owning, what we do and kind of the space. And I'm like, look, that's not the right approach. You have to understand you and what your specific knowledge is, and when we talk about getting into the investing game, there's experience, there's relationships, there's knowledge. A guy was like, man, I'm doing all these flips out here in Oregon and having some success. I'm like, that's great. That's awesome. But like, what, he goes, should I raise capital for a 50 unit deal, or should I go get a fourplex? I said, well, what is that? What do you have access to? And he couldn't answer. So he's over here thinking about like, should I raise capital for a 50 unit deal or do a 4 or 6 unit deal? And I'm like, what can you actually do? Like, what do you have access to? How can you apply your specific knowledge to that? And if you take it from that, standpoint, I think you start to get to where you need to go much faster. But that was the first one that I wanted to pull out, was this specific knowledge. And I wanted to ask you, Jerome, what is your specific knowledge, my man? When you think about that framework and what you do on a regular basis, where's your specific knowledge? Where is what you're doing that looks like work to other people, but feels like play for you?
And so and immediately went to dream realization, right? But people say, well, what does that mean? That's so abstract. That's so heady. Well, it's how, right? It's project management. It's figuring out how to get from where we are to where we want to go.
Exactly.
Right. And it's the implementation of that and then tracking the course to see if you need to make adjustments. Or is it just not enough time in the seat in order to yield the result? And that is kind of a tricky piece because what a lot of people will say is, oh, it's not working. And well, you just haven't done it enough. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But this model, and I started scribbling and I don't have it filled out yet, but I think this is one that we can do together. And, the specific knowledge, what my mind went specifically to brand, thought leadership, right? And if you are able to get specific knowledge and be known as a person who knows about this at an expert level, and then you can apply that against a problem, you create value.
Yes.
Right? Knowing stuff about basket weaving isn't valuable to a lot of people. But for that person who's trying to solve that very specific basket weaving problem, they may be willing to pay you whatever in order to get that answer.
Absolutely.
And so this goes back to choke point and a bunch of other stuff that we've talked about along the way. But knowing your choke point, knowing that specific knowledge, whatever that is, and I don't think you're born with it. I think you actually have to go find it. And it's the compound effect of all of the things because you've got to connect dots. I think specific knowledge is specifically connecting dots. Right. And so if you can connect dots that other people can't, or if you can recognize a pattern that others don't see, you can effectively skate to where the puck is going to be.
Right.
And slap it in the net. And that right there, especially in business, right? Because all the information is available to all the people. But in real estate in particular, right? Insider trading is the game.
Yep.
It is a strategic advantage. And it's not my fault if I get to the owner and you didn't.
Right.
It's not my fault if I saw the deal before it hit LoopNet and you didn't. That's your fault.
That's right.
Specific knowledge can be relationships, right? Knowledge of people. And when you figure out what that thing is for you, it's usually it feels like a problem or a challenge. When you figure out how to solve that, then you can go solve it for other people.
Yes.
I've been spending a lot of time lately on, well, people are asking questions about branding and marketing and building a thought leadership platform and being seen as an expert. And well, I only got here by solving the problem for myself, right? Because I knew that was what was going to be necessary in order to do the stuff that I love to do, like spend time with Apex performers. Apex performers are not going to spend time with somebody who can't actually help them move to the next space. There's just not a productive use of their time.
That's right. So we were talking about, I'm pretty sure we have a pretty good feel for what our specific knowledge is. The thing that I want to spend time on with you today is understanding leverage. Okay. So for me, understanding my specific knowledge has been my 7 or 8 year journey. Right. And that's not going to come overnight, but that's what I have spent a lot of time on. I'm to the point now, it's like where he says, when you can find out where you can apply your specific knowledge with a leverage, that's when you're going to be unstoppable. And so I want to spend some time on that. And before we do, we're going to talk about the, here we go. Yeah. Apply specific knowledge with leverage, and eventually you're going to get what you deserve. And let's talk through the 3 types of leverage that he kind of mentions. And the one thing I want to really have you think through is, and because this is what I'm, trying to figure out right now is, okay, out of the leverage that he mentions that's available, how do we take our specific knowledge, apply these 3 different leverage points, and then create the unstoppable force that we're working towards? So the first form of leverage is labor. other humans working for you. It's the oldest form of leverage and actually not a great one in the modern world. He would argue that this is the worst form of leverage that you could possibly use. Managing other people is incredibly messy. It requires tremendous leadership skills, and you're only one short hop away from mutiny or getting eaten or torn apart by the mob. The second form is money. It means every time you make a decision, you multiply it with money. Capital is a trickier form of leverage to use. It's more modern. It's the one that people have used to get fabulously wealthy in the last century. It's probably been the dominant form of leverage in the last century. And then the final form of leverage is brand new. And this is the most democratic form. It is products with no marginal cost of replication. This includes books, media, movies, code. Code is probably the most powerful form of permissionless leverage. All you need is a computer and you don't need anyone's permission. So I got some other things to talk through, but when we think about the commercial real estate space, okay, I know he mentions the fact that people being the worst form of leverage, right? It's the easiest, it's the oldest form of leverage. But in the commercial real estate space, the way I'm thinking about this is there's tasks. There's a lot of tasks that require a human brain to actually go do. We're not talking about software. We're talking about a tangible asset that needs people to actually manage. And in that, in and of itself, can create a problem if you want to get to, massive multitude in scale. Like I understand that. But removing that away from kind of the barrier here and not letting that be a barrier, I'm trying to figure out, okay, great. Well, what other types of leverage in our business can we implement, right? And money is one, and that's something that my partners and I are talking about. Is, hey, well, maybe we're at the point where we need to go get some outside investment dollars for FTW enterprises, not necessarily for deals, because we haven't had necessarily a big issue getting money for deals from the investment side, but is it time to look at the form of leverage and capital to actually scale the business? And then the third is code, which, I have some ideas around this, understanding, prop tech is a big piece right now, and there's all these different things, but, I'm not sure how applicable the code piece is to what I'm doing right now. So the first two being people and money is where my head is right now, trying to understand how we can utilize that leverage. So your thoughts on the three forms of leverage and then how to apply it to kind of our business.
Yeah. So unpacking this is cool, man. So let's go to capital, because I think it's the easiest one, right? You're already leveraging capital through syndication.
That's right.
And sure, you said, well, maybe we need to apply it to the operating business, but I'm always going to caution you specifically, why give up equity if you don't have to?
Sure.
I don't think anybody would say that you guys aren't growing at a rapid pace. I imagine if you apply for Inc., you'd make it, right? Inc. 5000. I imagine you guys would absolutely make that. So
yeah.
Are you on target for the goals that have been set? And if you are, then why would you give up your equity? Because you're probably ahead of what you want to do. In fact, I know you are.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick before we miss on that point, because, as we're looking forward, right? I mean, I am always 6 to 8 to 12 months ahead of my competition in Kansas City because of the amount of transactions, the people that we know, how involved we are in the industry. Our core business model has been value add multifamily. That will not change, but we're thinking, okay, 6, 8 months, 12 months down the road, when we first started, you mentioned picture day. We just had picture day, and it was very real on the form of leverage with other people. We had 7 people getting headshots. I just want to reiterate that fact that in 2019, by the end of 2019, all the way up till May of 2020, we were 3 guys. Okay. And now we're outnumbered. We got 4 employees outnumbering the principals at the business. But so it was very real on that side. But if we're looking forward and we're saying, okay, well, what other revenue streams, what other opportunities are in our market? It comes down to really starting to think about development projects. Okay. So we've got a lot of opportunity to kind of do some historic readaptive use projects. We've got some ground up new development in opportunity zones that we're evaluating. Those are all take a long time. And what else do they take? They take a lot of upfront at-risk capital. Okay. At-risk capital, a lot. You know this, right? I mean, you're doing this. You are literally in the process of doing this. So if we have those projects lined up, we do not have necessarily the at-risk capital or the capital we need to do those. Is that the right time? Is it now the right time to start thinking about it? So that was the point, and that was the main kind of reason we started to think about bringing on, some sort of outside investment into the deal. So that's the only reason, really.
And I would tell you the same thing that I think you'll end up here. Let me kind of condense or compress the time. Partner by the deal, right? Every time you add a new person into the nucleus, it changes.
Right.
And instead of we're dealing with this person for this thing, I don't think most people are going to come to the table, and this will go back to his game, specific knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. You don't need most people's specific knowledge to run FTW. You may need specific knowledge to do this project.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to leverage that from the people, and he didn't say this, but there's the labor of actually doing the thing. And then there's intellectual capital, which is when you're doing investments, I think what's really valuable, right?
Yep.
On a percentage basis, as far as a return on investment, you're going to get more from the execution of amazing idea. That idea has to be clear than you will from building anything, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's just being able to corner that, capture that, see the choke point, right? Identify the opportunity and then act against it. So as far as leverage for what you're doing, do it by the project. And then if it becomes core to the business, then I think you bring it up to that new level.
Yeah.
Right. But everything as you're testing, right? This is the beauty of leverage. The ability to test using someone else's capital and labor generates its extraordinary return on that investment for you, right? It's no different than if you were buying something, no money down, owner financing. Your return on investment, return on equity is astronomical. So leveraging somebody else's expertise, back to prop tech, do you really need to code? Or do you just need to find the person that solved your problem and then use that to see if you like it? And you've been doing this already, you bring it in-house, you absorb it, you acquire it if it becomes that important to your business.
Yeah.
We talked last week about the brokerage, right?
Yep.
That's been external. Strategically, you need that inside. The lift that it takes to build that inside is a whole lot more than it was just for you to go hang your shingle somewhere else and let them do the thing.
Right.
But you've identified that that's the specific knowledge in order for you guys to control your choke point, right? Property management, all of these things. And you test by leveraging the other folks. And then when you decide that this is mission critical, you vertically integrate.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna move on past that. I appreciate your thoughts on that. We're gonna keep talking about that as we progress week by week here, because I've got some more ideas. We very well may do a full episode just on the reasoning behind this and making the case and you poking holes on it. Because if I do put together a package for somebody to look at our business and say, I want to be involved in this from a strategic partnership and an investment standpoint, I want to be ready for those conversations. But let's talk what's more pressing for me right now, which is the oldest form of leverage, which is people. Okay. You managed a massive team at a big company, and I'm sure you hired a lot of people. Unfortunately, I know you had to fire a lot of people as well. But
right?
let's talk about this hiring piece because, as we continue to scale, we've got a couple more hires probably happening this year, but we've had recently 2 full-time individuals kind of start with us. And I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything in relation to onboarding. So your thoughts and ideas as you have hired probably tens or maybe even hundreds of people, thinking through kind of that process and maybe some good insights or pointers or tips on how to bring people into this culture of FTW of for the win of whatever we're building the right way, right? And what access points do I need to be thinking about from that perspective?
And I'm going to ramble here, but
That's all right.
hopefully we can get the points out. And so, one, clarity, and with anything else, clarity is the most important thing. If you can describe to them what you need from them with clarity and what you're going to measure to determine whether or not they did the thing or not, it makes every conversation much, much easier. When people get upset, frustrated, disappointed, is when they didn't have clear understanding of what they were supposed to do. They're working their butt off trying to do this thing, and you don't value it because they were working on the wrong thing. That, paired with communication, checking in, making sure that people aren't off in Never Never Land, is what maintains a healthy relationship. You add all that stuff together and you end up in a place where you can quickly decide this person's working out or they're not, right? And so it feels like micromanaging in the beginning, but it's to make sure they get off on the right foot. And you haven't had the joy of teaching Bella how to ride a bike yet, but when you take those training wheels off, you're going to be running behind her holding the seat, and then she's going to be wobbly, and you're going to make sure she doesn't fall because you don't want to scare her and let her skin her knee. And then eventually you're going to let her go. And I think all new employees get the same thing. They get a ton of attention up front, make sure that they understand where you want them to go. And then you eventually let them go because they understand the mission.
Yep.
And they need to be able to make decisions in alignment with the mission. If you've got to make every decision for them, then it's very easy for you to come back to the place where you're like, well, I might as well do it myself. And this is the stress for most leaders. It's like, well, if I got to spend the time to teach you how to do this, I could have just done it myself in half that time. I think the other place to go there, you get the people going, you get the continuous feedback, is being kind enough to tell them that they didn't meet your expectations. Sometimes we're scared. We don't want to offend. We don't want to upset. And we're pretending like everything's okay, and it's not. And being able to say, hey, I don't like that, or I don't think that was done very well. It's still being kind, but not sugarcoating it to the place where they don't get the message, because we tend to pull back on that feedback. And I think that was the greatest thing that I got from football, was they had no problem telling you screwed up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They on film, they rewind and play and rewind and play and rewind and play over and over again.
It's like, yeah, I don't ever want to be up there again. And I don't encourage people to do that, because that could really kill morale if a person's not built for that. But being willing to give them the direct one-on-one feedback, and them being comfortable with getting it and knowing that you're telling them that because you want them to get better, not because you're done with them or fed up with them. And so creating that environment. And so there's a really great book by Patrick Lencioni is called the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Mhm.
And, top level is like focus on results. And then there's accountability and a few different other levels that you transition through. But the first one, if I'm not mistaken, is like trust,
Yep.
right? And so your ability to create trust comes from everybody making promises to each other. And as leaders, it's easy for us not to pay attention to what people are doing. It's easy for us to be too busy to engage with the person when they need our support. And we are training the person on how we're going to engage and interact with them. And there's only going to be so many times that somebody says, "Hey, Logan, I need your help," before they just go do something else or decide that you don't care. And so they stop asking.
Yep.
And so don't be the person that's not accountable to the people on your team, right? If you expect accountability, then make sure you're demonstrating that so they know that that is what's expected here. And I will tell you that was the biggest thing that I had to deal with one of my teams was getting them in the habit of making promises and then coming back and proving that they delivered against that promise. That wasn't happening at a meaningful level when we got started. We were able to shift that by routinely having those meetings. And I know you guys are implementing EOS,
Yep.
right? And so you got your rocks, but making sure that everybody knows what their tasks are, when they're supposed to be completed, and setting up some type of protocol if they're not going to meet their obligation so that there's not surprises.
Yep.
Because then you can plan life. So, a lot of attention up front, communicating well, being very clear about expectations and deadlines, and then allowing people to live in an environment where they know they can count on you for support and that it's reciprocal. I'm giving you this thing to do. I'm trusting you with it. I need you to give that back to me, because if you don't, and I stop trusting you because I can't count on you to keep your promises to me, it's not going to work out.
Yep. All right. That was I just took a ton of notes. Thank you for that. And I hope you guys realize I use this time to learn just as much as I do to vent and to talk through things. So moving on for the last 10 minutes, I want to talk about inputs and outputs. In Naval's book, it really talks about, understanding that to be extremely wealthy, you do not get necessarily measured on your inputs, but you get measured on your outputs. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. He's got some great things, but it says, if you're looking at professions where your inputs and your outputs are highly connected, it's going to be very hard to create wealth and make wealth for yourself in that process. And so he goes on to talking about your personal hourly rate. And this hit home for me because I was meeting with a guy that you know very well just this week, Brock. And I'm listening to the inputs that Brock's putting in and the outputs, and they are not correlated. Okay. They are not correlated in the right way, so it's an actually reverse correlation. He's not putting the inputs in, but the outputs that he's getting, man, oh man, if I'm not going to mention them, but if I did, you guys, your minds might be blown a little bit. But anyways, at the end of the day, I'm thinking about all of the inputs, right? And this leverage and inputs and specific knowledge and what's going to lead kind of more to the outputs. And thankfully, my business partners are extremely forward thinking and strategic thinkers. And so that's how their minds typically work. Anyways, I'm much more of a tactily, tactily, I don't know the word, but I'm much more, on what needs to get done. How do I get it done? And when is it going to get done? So I'm what's the word I'm looking for?
You're tactical.
Tactical. Thank you. I'm tactical when it comes to that. So I want to talk about this idea of, in this commercial real estate space, figuring out ways to get your outputs uncorrelated to your inputs. And I think it has a lot to do with understanding what that personal hourly rate is. And he says to go ahead and set that personal hourly rate at a crazy number. Even when he was not wealthy, he had conversations with his mom, and his mom would give him tasks to do. And you have to remember, these guys are immigrants to the United States, first generation. He's second generation, but so very well, just getting started. When she would give him things to do, he said, I'm not going to do that. He had a $5,000 an hour personal hourly rate before he had any dollars to his name. Think about that. And he looks back and he goes, really, it was more or less it was closer to $1,000. But when I think about my inputs and outputs, he relays the facts that he's a lazy guy. But when he thinks about the actual time that he has put in with all this strategic thinking and understanding these different components of leverage and specific knowledge, he goes, my hourly rate is way higher than $5,000 an hour. The actual work, he gets obsessed, works really hard on something, and then lets it, he has all those different forms of leverage to allow him to step away. So in our business, in what we're doing, I'm trying to figure out what my personal hourly rate should be. Okay. So let's break this down real quick. I want your thoughts on this because I took some notes in the book like I always do. And I want to share these just to give some perspective, right? Okay. So if you think about 2,096 hours kind of being the 8-hour a week, 262 days, working days in the year, 8 hours a day, to make $1 million, it's $477 per hour. Okay. To make, if you're only going to work 6 hours out of those 262 days, you have 1,572 hours, and your hourly rate to make $1 million went to 636. And so I was thinking about this. I was like, man, I think I'm somewhere between this 500 and 1,000 kind of, range, trying to figure out what's realistic. It's kind of Goldilocks for me, right? It's right outside of my reach. We've talked a lot about this $10 task, $100 task, $1,000 task, $10,000 task, right? And I kind of came up to this notion that my hourly rate should be $1,500 an hour, which is $2.34 million if you do it from the 2,000-hour work week. So, and the numbers are kind of arbitrary, right? But they're not arbitrary in the sense that if it actually impacts the way that you make decisions and what you focus on, paying somebody to do a $100 task, it shouldn't be. It should be second nature, right? It should just be like, hey, that's going off here. So, in this commercial real estate space, you're involved in it. I'm involved in it. What are some inputs that are not correlated to these outputs? And we've dubbed these things as profit producing activities in the past. We've dubbed them as high value tasks. We've dubbed them all of these things. But in your mind, looking objectively at what we do at FTW, like where do you see some of those, inputs that are not correlated to the outputs? So how do I focus more on what the outputs need to be, these outputs that are astronomical from the inputs that, don't seem like they're the everyday tasks? So that's what I'm trying to put my thumb on right now. I'm also interested in hearing your thoughts on kind of the personal hourly rate and what I came up with.
Yeah. So shout out to Justin Breen. He broke this down for me. He said, look, man, when you're highly, highly compensated, you do not think about a 40-hour work week. What you think about is getting paid in chunks, right? And so you think about actors. He used this example. He's like, an actor might make $1 million from being in a movie, and then they're on the bench for 6 months or a year, and then the next one comes, and then the next one comes, but they aren't trying to put together a work week, and they're trying to basically do deals. And that's where I'm going to go for you, right?
Yeah.
The profit producing activity, the high value, uncorrelated time to actual financial impact, is talking to owners, right? And other people who will bring you deals.
Yep.
Right. And the people bringing you deals creates friction, but you can leverage their time and their network.
Exactly.
Right. But being direct to seller allows you to create a massive amount of money for what ends up being a very small amount of time. Right. If you think about your last off market deal, sure, you may have been talking to the person for the past 3 years, but when you add up all the time, you probably haven't spent 80 hours with them.
Yeah.
And the amount of value created through that relationship is probably several $100,000. Right. And so the more, all the money's in the deal, anything that you can do to get the deal. Right. And so decoupling it, how can you get more marketing in the street? You came up earlier today in another call that I was in. It's like, more people know about this guy than Patrick Mahomes. Right. And it's like, King of Kansas City, Mr. Kansas City. It's just like, okay, how can you be known? Because it's not who you know all the time. It's who knows you.
That's
right.
Exactly
And
right.
so for the things that you can do to grow the brand, so you have more people reaching out and knowing what you do, the omnipresence that we talk about from time to time, coupled with your intentional engagement with the people who have the deals that allow you to unlock the equity, is the massive dot connecting.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece of that is, all right, what else do I need? I need the deals and I need the money. I got to have the deals, got to have the money. So how do you get people who are going to write really large checks to show up instead of dealing with the $10,000 to $35,000 investor, which requires a ton of time, energy, effort, and I'll call it cost of investor.
Yep.
Right? Cost to onboard a new investor. Right? The other thing, so there's bigger checks, but there's also referrals from the people that are already in.
Yep.
Getting people to refer, and much of that goes to reporting, but getting people to refer is another thing that, because you're not doing anything different to get people to refer other than giving them that amazing experience. So, right, getting deals, having people bring you deals by people knowing you're the guy, people coming with bigger checks so that you reduce your costs to add new investors, and adding in referrals. I think those 4 activities, the biggest change. And, notice that I didn't say anything about operations, and I'm an operations guy, right?
Yeah.
But the operations is just completion of unlocking the equity of the deal when you buy at the right cost basis.
Absolutely, man. So run those through. So I have my notes right. We've got deals, so direct to property owners. We've got bigger checks,
referrals, right? So splitting it into 2 pots, and then back up at the other level is people bringing you deals because they know who you are, right? The more people who know who you are, and this is just the omnipresence, is going to be the game. So what can you do to grow the brand? What can you do to get more access to deals?
Guys, you have to check Naval Ravikant out. If you are doing something in relation to running a business, if you are focused on being a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, and you are in control of understanding inputs and outputs in your own business, or if you've got a business and you're scaling, if you have the time, make the time to go check this guy out. It will transform the way that you're thinking about your business. We barely even scratched the surface. I think there'll be 3 or 4 of these types of episodes only on this book in particular. And I think you got a pretty unique experience here on understanding how to apply some of these things to your business through what Jerome and I just did. Jerome, you have any closing thoughts, man?
Wealth isn't what you're seeking.
Wealth is not what you should be seeking. All right. We're going to end like we always do. And I am pretty excited about the quote that we've got. It's about critics. Jerome and I have talked a lot about, haters and critics and things like that. And I can tell you this, guys, as I continue to be more known in the space in Kansas City, there's a lot of critics that like to kind of come through the woodwork, but I'm taking Nicki Minaj's experience here and giving you guys a quote from Nicki. If you don't have critics, you probably don't have success either. So do not worry about the critics as much as you do as your relationships. There's always going to be people that are looking to poke you and try to, see how you're going to respond to this or that. So that's what I'll leave you with. Until next time, get out there, let's elevate and let's compress. Thanks again, Jerome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, compressors, if something you heard struck you, made you feel a little bit uncomfortable, good. Head on over to compressionpodcast.com. And then you can also subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast at. If you feel inclined to, please leave us a review. It's obviously helpful. But instead, I'm going to call you out today. I'm going to call you out and make sure that you do your part, sharing this message by sharing it with one person that might need to hear what we talked about today. Be great. Nothing else pays.